All right, let's now discuss the certification process. So the certification process is just part of the entire post-file submission workflow. As you can see, this is the entire expected work that you do in CalPAS. You submit your files. It then goes through the CalPAS portal. If your file gets rejected during upload, you will get an IVR error. And then, of course, you then upload a new, better version of that file. And if all of the records pass, it goes through validations. And then you have another level of validations, which is your data discrepancy and also certification data discrepancy. And then if all of those records pass and there are no fatal errors based on that second layer of validation, then you then would be able to look at your real-time reports. And then based on that real-time reports, then you should be able to anticipate your potential counts. Now, if a snapshot revision is activated, meaning it generates a snapshot for you, then that snapshot will then reflect the same counts, however, reflected as a certification report. So any error that you ignore as a data discrepancy will also manifest as a certification data discrepancy error. So right now, we are in a time period where the snapshots have not been activated for fall 2 yet. Since we are not in this period, your attention should be resolving data discrepancies as well as reviewing real-time reports, which would be reflective of what you will be certifying. Once we have the snapshots activated and you've cleared all of your errors, and you don't have any certification data discrepancies, no certification errors, you can send out those reports to your data stakeholders or your EL services department, your curriculum specialist, your HR for all of those FTE reports. And if they all sign off on the accuracy of each of those reports, then you can click on the LA Approve button, which will make you officially certified for Fall 2. But right now, your focus is submitting your data as well as resolving data discrepancy errors. A detailed training with regards to the snapshot revisions as well as error resolutions for specific errors can also be viewed in our YouTube channel. In fact, let's just go there right now. If you just go to YouTube and then just type FICMAT CSIS, then you should be able to see our CSIS training channel. So you have here your intro and basic functionalities. So with regards to how the snapshot revisions work, you can review that in this section and look for the snapshot and revision playlist. The snapshot and revision playlist would provide you detailed recording of this session of how the snapshots revision works as well as how to correct errors. And then of course you have your snapshot revision mini video, which provides you a detailed explanation on the different revised and certified versions and how to take advantage of that functionality when correcting errors and coordinating with other entities within your LEA in terms of setting them in review or LA approve or looking at a more updated, revised, and certified version of that report. These are the trainings that you could watch apart from this video that you're watching right now, and that should provide you with a more detailed explanation on this aspect. So your focus, since the snapshot revisions won't trigger or be activated until December 15, your focus is to ensure that your data discrepancies, at least the fatal errors, are down to zero, and your real-time reports, if you've already corrected all of your data discrepancies for Fall 2, ensure that your real-time reports are also accurate, right? And then once you have your snapshots activated on December 15, or when you have time after December 15 to look at the snapshot reports, then you should be able to go to the certification reports version. So let me then show you how that looks like in CalPads, right? So first of all, for Fall 2, you should be able to see the Fall 2 certification as early as December 15. So just like in Fall 1, Fall 2 should provide you a summary of all of the fatal errors and also provide you a list of reports that you should be able to review and certify. So if you have not approved or set the certification in review, by default, you should have revision status of revised and certified. So again, here's a summary of this snapshot. The snapshot would reveal the revision create date, the revision ID, when the CDD, what part of the data discrepancy was picked up by the snapshot to be included on this list, which you have to be aware of that because this is crucial when comparing CDDs with your data discrepancies. If you've corrected your data discrepancies and you still see the same errors on your CDD, that's because the snapshots have not been refreshed yet based on the changes you've made on your data discrepancy side, which I will show in a few minutes. And you have your total errors, you have your fatal errors, which is reflective of uncorrected data discrepancy errors that you have for Fall 2. You have your warnings, and then you have your certification reports. As you can see, you only have a minimum of 5 reports to review. So once you have all of these reports marked as green, then CalPads at the minimum will allow you to then approve this version. But that doesn't make sense, right? You should at least review all of the detailed reports because that would support the accuracy of your aggregate counts on these reports. Okay, so then you have your revision history, which is just representative of all of the snapshots that will be generated throughout the Fall 2 submission period. Right, so when correcting errors, you should be able to see those here under certification summary. So there are 2 activities you will need to do on the certification process. One is correcting fatal errors and even warnings if needed, and reviewing the reports after. So that's essentially the sequence. You first have to clear all of your errors before reviewing reports because any records, any courses that are triggering errors will not be included on the reports. So it's important that you clear errors first. Once all of those errors are down to 0, then that's the time when you start reviewing your certification reports. So with that, let's first discuss resolving errors. Okay. Normally, LEAs would go here and see the errors listed, right? It would show all of the errors, and you then go ahead and start correcting those errors. But I would highly recommend that you don't look at this section and instead work on your errors on the data discrepancy side. Okay. So unless you have certification errors, which we don't see here, all of the errors that is listed here can be seen on the data discrepancy side. So the benefit of using the data discrepancy section is that any changes you make is refreshed and updated quicker as compared to the certification side. So let's now resolve errors on the data discrepancy side. If you are new to CalPads and you're wondering how do we resolve these errors, so there are 2 ways to determine what the errors are and how to resolve them. One is by clicking on this error number, which then brings you to this specific error page in CalPAD, in the user manual. So it provides you information whether if this error is active, if it's fatal, and then also it provides you any information if there are any active defects impacting this error validation. And then it provides you all of the error description, field validations, and suggested resolutions. This is the benefit of clicking on that link and referring to this because you should be able to see any active defects, right? Now, there is also another way to be able to look at the error list. You can just go down here and click on error list, and you should be able to download the most recent error list in CalPADS, which is the spreadsheet version of all of the errors listed in the error page in the user manual. So it's the same columns and field elements that you see in each of those error pages, right? If you are more comfortable with, looking at errors through a spreadsheet, then by all means download this file and refer to this whenever you get an error. However, if you're like me, you can just always click on the error and it should provide you this error definition. Okay, so let's start with resolving some of these errors. Let's first look at this one here, SDM 689F, no staff assignment for demographics. So if I click on the error link, it should give me an explanation of what this error means. So it's stating that there are no staff assignment for demographics. Staff demographics was reported for a seed that has no staff assignments. And then we have a suggested resolution here. It's stating that if you have a staff demographic record that is active, meaning the staff demographic record has no employment end date and it overlaps census day, then CalPADS will look for a staff assignment. So what does that mean? Means that once you have an actively employed staff member at your district, you are required to submit their staff assignment this year, which is reflective of the job that they are doing this year. So let's look at this record. Click on view. It should just give you a description and a link to that record. However, I would rather you click on the SSID or on the seed number, and it should bring you to the staff details of that staff member. So number one, it says here that you have a staff demographic record that is actively employed this year, right? So meaning when it says actively employed, there are no employment end dates here. So meaning even though this staff demographic record was based on last year's submission, since there are no employment end dates, this still overlaps census day this year. And so based on that, it will look for a staff assignment for this academic period. So the question is, when you have this error, you have to double check two things. Number one, is the staff member still employed? So this is again a reminder that you need to do housekeeping at the start of the year to determine who are your employed staff and who are the staff members who already retired, right? And then number two, if they are still employed, what are their job assignments? What are their staff assignments, right? So for this, luckily, Mango Nada apparently retired at the end of 24-25. Okay? So to resolve this, the easy way to resolve this is to just put an employment end date in here. Okay? If you have multiple staff members who needs to have their employment end dates reported, you could extract that from your SIS and submit an updated staff demographic record with the employment end date. Now, if you only have a handful, you can manually correct that online by just opening the record from the prior academic year and putting an employment end date here. Okay, so let's just say 6/30/2025. Okay, once you put an employment end date, it then closes the demographic record, and therefore no validations would trigger after this because there are no active staff demographic records overlapping census day. Okay, so that's how to resolve a variation of this SDM 689F2. Another is, let's say you have another staff member, creme brulee. Creme brulee appears to have a demographic record last year. However, the staff member is still employed this year. Okay. So with that said, your first information you need to update would be the staff demographic record. Why? Because obviously we need to have a staff demographic record with an effective start date this year, reflecting the first day of school, right? Plus, you also have to update their staff service years that would reflect the incremental update for this year. So now let's just add a new record. Okay. Record effective start date would be the first day of school, which is August 11. And then, of course, you have to populate their race and ethnicity. Race code missing, no. No, race code would be, let's say, white. Then highest degree code would be, let's say, this is just a 3 year. This is just the staff member's third year. So I assume it just be baccalaureate. And then their employment status code, you could probably tell probationary depending on the status code that staff member has. Okay, so let's just say probationary. And then, of course, the staff service years. Again, this is self-reported by the LEA because CalPAS does not automatically add a new staff demographic record and add a year of service to this. And I believe your SIS is not intelligent enough to do that. So you have to manually update their staff service years. So this would be the staff service years, the staff's third year. And so I click on post. Now, why is this important? Why do we have to update the demographic record every year? Again, at least for this staff member, again, this is a way for us to be able to update whether or not the staff member is now experienced or not in the eyes of CalPAS, right? So last year, the staff member was not experienced yet because they were just 2 years in service. Now, this would be their third year. So they would be taken off the inexperienced category in the CalSAS or ESSA assessment. Okay. So now we have a baccalaureate, and then this would be their third year. So that should resolve your SDM 689F2. Another scenario would be SAS record does not have an SDM record with dates for the same reporting period. So let's click on this error. It says that a SAS record must have a corresponding SDM record with an effective and employment date in the reporting period. So this error was introduced essentially ensure that a staff demographic record is updated every year, and in particular, the staff service years is also updated, right? So let's look at this record, and we click on this first one. So this would be Hal Lepeño. Yeah, there you go. So it turns out that we reported an assignment for Hal However, there are no staff demographic record for him this year. So you can tell us that the staff member is employed and teaching a class. However, that person is not is does not have a demographic record this year. So with that, you just have to report a staff demographic record effective this year. 11. Yes. No, no. 11. Baccalaureate. Tenured. And 11. Compose. And that should resolve the SAS record reported but doesn't have an SDM record reported error. Okay. The next common error that we could troubleshoot would be the SCSC 139F2. So this is stating that you submitted an SCSE record. However, the parent course record isn't available, or there is a mismatch on the record. So the fields being validated would be school course of delivery, academic year ID, local course ID, course section ID, and academic term code. So if you submitted an SCSE record with a specific local course ID, it will have to find a parent course section that shares the same local course ID, and all of these data elements must be the same as well. So with that, let's see why the SCSC 139F2 is triggering. Okay, so it says here, we click on view, and this is stating that you have a student enrolled in preschool and a parent course is not available. So to resolve this, you have to click on view, copy the local course ID, and then go to your course data and see why that local course ID is not there. So right now I'm in our course data. However, there's only one course available or reported in CalPads. And this is for 4th grade. So if I even filter for the local course ID, obviously there's nothing to filter because I only have one record there. So what this means is that I extracted as part of the SCSE file courses that should have not been reported. So obviously, as part of this, if I look at this record, again, this is for a preschool. However, the preschool staff members in their SIS was marked as do not report, and so any course associated to them are not extracted to CalPads. And so now this is the issue wherein you have an orphan record. So what do you do? So a way to resolve this is just to delete this SCSE records. To do that, what you could do is just, if you have, let's say, 100 of these records and you can just manually delete them because there's no association to the record, what you could do is, let's just go to the student's record and see if you could delete it here. Yeah, you could essentially delete this one by one. Just delete the offending record. And as you can see, this record was showing the same warning. No course record can be found with matching this record. So this is also a indicator that this is an orphan SCSE record. So you could manually delete these records one by one in CalPads if it's just a handful of students, right? However, if let's say you have introduced an SCSC file that should not have been, 100 records that should have not been reported to begin with, a more efficient way to do that is just to download the data discrepancy error extract and then identifying the SCSC record, right? So download SCSC extract, and then creating a file, a delete file out of that extract. So you could go to extracts, and once this is available, you open it up and then use the same record information to submit an SCSC file delete. Or if you have the original file, you can just open it up and add a D transaction to that file and re-upload to CalPads, and then submit a brand new file. So this is the extract we have. As you can see, it is in text format. What you could do is just open up the download the SCSC file type, batch file template, I mean, and go to click on the SCSC file template, and then let's just open up a blank workbook, download or convert the file that we had from that extract that we downloaded, the data discrepancy extract. Click on finish. And so this is the data discrepancy extract. So the format here would be similar to your batch file template, except, of course, you have additional column elements here. So you can just download from Carnegie units all the way to data type. Okay. And then go to your batch file template for SCSC, paste that information. Okay. So let's just delete this, and then just type a D transaction on this column. You also have to replace the record type from SCSC-E to just SCSC. My bad. It should be SCSE. Okay. And then a D transaction. Save it. And then upload to CalPads. The reason why I didn't have to look at each is because since all of these are preschool, naturally you want to remove these records you introduce in CalPads. So once you save this file, upload it to CalPads, and it should delete those records and clear your SCSC 139s. So you only do that if you have hundreds of those records that you want to get rid of. Now, if you have a handful, you can just manually delete those one by one by going to the student course section record of the student and identifying the course section ID that triggered that SCSC 139. Now, on the flip side, if this has to be reported, if you have a course, SCSC records for students that are reportable, so you have self-contained classes, however, you are getting an SCSC 139, you just have to re-upload your CRSE records that would include the parent record, course record associated to that class. So that's just a way to resolve errors in CalPAS. Obviously, you can't memorize all of these error numbers and you can't memorize all of the rules and validation. So the secret here is just knowing what the requirements are, knowing the documentation you need to use, which is the CalPADs error list, and then employing different resources such as the batch file templates, as well as the CalPADS file specifications forms, and as well as the valid code combinations documents in resolving errors in CalPADS. So once all of these are resolved, you wait for a new snapshot, and the snapshots then will update and bring down the errors hopefully to zero. Once the errors are down to zero, then that's the only time when you can go ahead and review your reports. Okay. Also, if you are still, if you still find the need to look at your warnings, then by all means do so. So there are times when you have warnings where admin staff are missing, people service staff are missing, teacher staff are missing for particular school of attendances. So you may want to check this. This is an indicator that you may have not submitted data for the specific schools. Now, if for some reason you really did not have any reportable staff for that school this year, you can ignore the warning and move on in clearing your other errors. Once all of those errors are cleared, then you can go ahead and wait for a snapshot. And then once a snapshot brings it all down to zero, you can then review the reports. Once you've reviewed all of your reports, just like in other submissions, there would be a box here that would get activated once you have all of the reports in green check marks. And that should then allow you to check that box saying you agree to the accuracy of the reports that you're approving. Once you check that, an LEA approve button, a LEA approve button will appear here that you can click on. Once you click that button, you're officially served. Fall 2 does not require a SELPA approval. Once you've clicked on LEA approved, that is it. You are technically approved and certified for Fall 2. So that's essentially the process of certification. So with that, I will be passing on the mic back to Nate so he could discuss the importance of all of these reports and the relevance of the reports for Fall 2.